Thank you for watching the Furious Flower Facebook Live reading series. For those of you who don't know, the Furious Flower Poetry Center at James Madison University is the nation's oldest academic center dedicated to Black poetry. In the 25 years since the first Furious Flower Conference and the 15 years of the center's brick-and-mortar existence, Furious Flower programs have reached thousands of poets, educators, students, and poetry lovers around the world. From groundbreaking media and anthologies to children's creativity camps, summer seminars for educators, and decade-defining conferences, Furious Flower has impacted literary communities on local, regional, national, and international levels by creating platforms for Black poets to encounter their readers and for readers to experience and engage with Black literary culture in new and exciting ways. For this and the next 2 Fridays in April, Furious Flower celebrates National Poetry Month by bringing you poets to enjoy at home. My name is Bonair-Agard. I am in Chicago. I am from Brooklyn. I'm from Trinidad and Tobago. I've published 4 books of poems and a number of other things. And I'm about to read a bunch of new ones. I have poems. I have rum. There you go. Light. Sometimes in between the trees, light. And in the middle of a forest, clearing. And snaking through those woods, a river, a creek. And in the reflection of that mucky water, your own face. And you don't dip your hands in, you skip stones. Behind you are tractors and bales of hay and canisters of gasoline. And just off the road on a lawn, a Ford Bronco sitting on 50s, so high you can almost believe it, a team of horses whose flanks are trembling, who are beautifully restless, who snort contentedly. But you walk past it and soon come to a field, corn. And the light is everywhere in between the big dry blades of crop. And the sun is both joy and a terrible mockery. It's fall, it's cool. The light is wild in that crop though. It turns parts of stalk to steel, and the glare comes off ears of corn, the flowers topping the stalks, the treacherous leaf edges, slithering things, a distant car's wing mirror. Here too, under siege, you drop to a knee and breathe deep enough to slow the blood circling back and racing towards your heart, where everything began, where each strand began to stake its claim for your future, where chromosomes are right now erecting new ladders toward your skull, toward the balls of your feet. Nana Doreen, Nana Caroline, Papa Nicodemus, Papa John, Papa Eugenia, Grandma Buck, all kneeling in the meadow with me. Uncle Obadiah in the meadow with me. Hudley in the meadow with me. Each of them with a brand new blade, a 3-canal cutlass, a handle planed from cedar. All of us runaways and swordsmen, all of us fed from the yard, all of us deep black in the wilding light, all of us blooding our hearts in similar timing, syncopating to one another's breathing. The train runs through us and we cutter together against the light in the fields. Left foot danced back, wrist roll the blade back, and parallel with that ankle upturned to flip back down through a shaft of blinding white, and we breathe out to sing in time with a new cutlass song, and all the blades of songs call up to the sun to catch and harness the light, like the light is horses' flanks soaked and brushed to shine. All the Egun and me, right foot back to straight up stance, back hand flip up, blade back past face to block the sun, to end in horse stance, cutlass down and right towards the earth where the blade belong in times of plenty, where the blade belong when there is no war, where the blade belong when we dig in eddos to mash with milk for a baby newly off the breast, where the blade belong when we know we belong to this land first, like first people belong, like Carib and Olmec belong together, and the light get yoked like several oxen toward the land and headed toward the creek, and the sound the blade make to get there is like the sound of a soft whip, like the sound of a cotton cloth the Egun weaved and whip soft toward the baby, laughing now because the cotton weaved by black hands for black hands is a soft cotton, is a play whip which belongs same place the cutlass belongs, soft, warbling down by the right leg, echoing like a singing bowl, wanting only the red and gold cocoa and maybe the goat's bleating neck for sacrifice and celebration. Maybe it's Grandma Buck who noticed the light first and the cold, Maybe Obadiah, who know we ask the cutlass to sing this song by Babylon Rivers. Maybe John, maybe Eugenia, maybe Lena, who see the light snorting together and bowing its head to the yoke and the fields in front, even if the tractors and the Ford Bronco and less soft whips trying to come behind. Maybe the left arm upright, coming around the left elbow blade parallel to horizon, pushing up the breeze to make that calabash breath and flip all the way around the head is defensive move and attack at once. Maybe Nana Caroline teach me that. Maybe Nicodemus, who know both sugarcane and how to drive the light to furrow the ground, teach me that. But if you hear now how everybody blood singing, how thunder we is when we spin in we soft cotton and come back down, and everybody ladder is Jacob own, and the strands belong to the blackest part we could think of. So we give all to whoever to come, and we could hear in the distance how they're trying to wile the light against we, and move the tractors and the tall wheels and gas and the blades of grass. And we are not afraid. All right. Drumdemic, virus 1. What is the song to a pandemic? To a people dying when they are all people? When struggling to find a slick enough pattern to call meter? To survive a pandemic, we need a talking drum to syncopate the way a virus moves. No loop of a head nod will mimic this, base this away. No matter how deep the underwater ripple of the kit's kick, we need a talking drum with a slow squeeze and scooped lung to call back to a back bent in the sun, made to sing long, a moan, a syncopathic. It is time to invent rhythm we can randomize into tune. To dice roll the manner of a virus move is to multiply by a million how a minstrel mass mimic a river. Multiple tides that work from above to below. Here, in the middle of the night, waiting for America to tumble into peak infection is to witness icosahedral dice roll. Each bounce the possibility of a million points of refracted light to catch and shatter again. To be caught and shattered again is to try to impose a song on a pandemic. Only the most ancient indigents have the keys to them pitch and chant, of which our beats are part, but mere thinned out semantic change variants of something that might talk back to a die, unwilling, unable to pick a side on which to land, and so must upturn forever until the end of a maddening physics. We need a talking drum. Something in the earth, rooting jazz, Billy apostropheing bars not even the FBI could cipher and code. Up late in the middle, looking at my child's ball, its tiny nubs poking out all around a little coronavirus mirror, imagining my indiscretions the reason for the world's displacement, that maybe I could fulfill my obligations to Yemaya and Olokun and stop all this right now. That I could do my duty to appease the roiling trenches of the oceanic underbelly, struggle against my own cowardice and restore a correct music. You ever feel you have a song inside you that could change how to sing? That maybe you hear a few times how to make the note, but not the note self? That your brain is a virus with no host to feed from? That the note unheard is the host? That you alone are walking this exquisite madness around the village of your interior life on the end of a long chain like the baddest dog in the roughest yard? Is not just you. You're not special. Everybody hoping for the quiet and the song they can't sing. Today, even the bottom of the ocean want to help you find that note. Olokun know what it is to be locked on that chain, to be bad dog leashed, jazz licks trophied into silence and waiting for the lung to scar into ridges of death. This is the pandemic. Every song, everywhere, simultaneously unsung. Only noise left, roiling the sea, drumming the air. All right. How I became urban. I had to get robbed 3 times, run through the project courtyards on 155th Street, get 86 from the Copacabana nightclub alongside 4 Dominican homies. Them days I was all nerve endings, muscle and adrenaline. I had to not know where rent was coming from when my job relocated to Trumbull, Connecticut. And I say, hell nah. So for a few days, I bagged up dope in the Bridge Apartment Towers. I had to run full court up at the cloisters, make it clear we were willing to turn our turn on the blacktop into a brawl at any provocation. I had to come out dead of night in pre-white people Bed-Stuy to use the payphone to answer a page. Believe me when I say that was the first time I got invited to a poetry reading. I protested all the way to that saving of my life. I had to fall in love many times. I had to betray it. I had to punch a cab driver through the taxi partition, kick another's wing mirror off, call my crew from the backseat of a third while he called his, bawl in my woman's arms in the middle of First Avenue, make love in a bar restroom on Spring and Elizabeth, on the roof of Bar 13, in an empty lot in Spanish Harlem. All this was pre-white people, and I may not have called it making love at the time. I had to learn how to love in retrospect and leave the city I loved most. I had to get my eye closed down bloody with a hairbrush. I had to duck out the back of the bar when the white boy I slapped returned with the police. I had to drink 40s on corners in East New York and run half court while velour sweat-suited brothers in dookie gold chains and Glocks on their hips bet $100 bills on the games we were running. Where was the rent coming from? That day, I stepped over the body of a 13-year-old. The night the corner exploded and a boy oozied round. Bed-Stuy, do or die, Biggie still alive and freestyling half a mile away. I was becoming an urban Negro. I still had to drink Guinness on the front stoop with other longing for tropical home Caribbean brethren. Only thing separating us, the red hue of Kalinago and Taino in the way we laughed. All of us becoming urban, making love, becoming niggas outside of the gaze of intrepid and well-meaning white people. I had to memorize all of Paid in Full, all of Ready to Die, all of Midnight Marauders, the silhouettes of unmarked police cars, handshakes, the several meanings of You Straight, Gully, Boogie Down, every line of the subway system, and specific whistles from my own block, the blocks where I was visiting, and the Vanderveer projects. Where was the river I'd left behind? The rent, extemporaneous Kaiso. I had to find missing brethren had been transported upstate. I had to find and greet them there myself, recite the come home dates of homies, their waiting children's names. I had to write bad poems, whisper them into graves, into curtains, past midnight in dilapidated basement ciphers. I had to be wrongly accused, fail a polygraph, cuss out the investigator, live, threaten, and remember who I was at all times, no matter what enveloped me, who I was becoming, how much blood I lost or glass I smashed. I never called the police. I made it policy to know who I was and what dark magics it served me to conjure and which not. I was becoming urban, black, Negro, nigger. That was the truth of me, the whole layered extraction and compilation of how magic I evolved. I had to clock the full moon from between brownstones while begging a woman for a kiss. That was pre-white people, before I was a threat. That was me you saw, figuring out how to manage the pain, figuring out how to be free. A Small History of Trinidad, Part 23. Enough is we, and the remnants of Igbo in the land, and the retrieve and flex of we and we. And isn't the clatax of the bois an exclamation too? Isn't it sometimes a caress? Enough is the cipher in sugarcane's leaves in the blazing 2 o'clock sun when a trade wind asked it a question and it called to the sea, or to the memory of blood and dirt below its seams. Cutlass dragging on concrete is not threat, it's how to think about soprano or how to spell runaway. Boys are still wrestling in the language of Congo, which means we balance with our solar plexus, not our legs. Or maybe that is the heart's drum, keeping time to make a spirit level keel. Enough is all, enough is oil. Federation has been ours already. Hausa, Yoruba, Mandingo, Congo, Koromanti, American, Indigenous, all make a people nobody knew to ask for when they come to the house. Ask the Indian how deep, how far back we go, how he grow crop from home, measure the 11th parallel and learn how Columbus fool himself when he say Indian, but not we when we reply Indian, and see how far back we go with Kali and Kalinda. You think it's off? We went through the Atlantic to retrieve we people. Enough. We never needed massa. Never. Not now, neither. He language is a boat to bring other languages to nation, which are enough and exactly that literal. We sought the oil drums out. We checked for them while searching for the song that would turn the heads of our gods, and we came upon what we'd been seeking, and our smiths taught the gods new tongues, word. What kingdoms we could build now, what earths and moons and seas and new canoes. Believe we will turn bullets one day into furrowed ballasts to float us and sink the frigates which bought and brought us. We is enough. We is a lavwe, lavre, the truth, the song, the now, the fire and the raise are raising up a holy day. Every day we say who we are and call all our people indigenous and black and parallel and together and unkillable, and all the words, all the kingdoms we slicked right on by the white and built and spoke new. All right. One more. It's a long one. And then the Q and A business. This poem is a couple years old, but its title returns again and again. Spring. 1. The rains have come, and with it the end to the settling in of fear. Name spring what it is for once, and that's what you'll have, the end of fear, which of course means in another language, time to bloom, which in the middle of a city which turns its gates exactly shut at the same time of night to the same people in recycled manners of cruelty in each decade means the recounting of bees. Or ask some youth, they're recalibrating. And yes, I mean recalibrate to bring to mind the bullet, which worked and reworked to mimic the state, learns to approach with directed force and petal open to shrapnel itself millimeter by millimeter through flesh and organ, and draws with it, through its gaping exit, all the colors of spring. What we focus on, though, is the gun. It's easier. We have to follow its flight, stagnant as it is. Flight is the work of bees recalibrated to ride the season in search of flowers, in search of pollen, to graft to pollen, to emerge species that might make themselves more resilient by deepening the complexity of the strange which make them bloom. The gun, remember, has weight. We can see the lined face of the man, once a sheet welder maybe, bent to the task of the lines which slick the chambers smooth on shuttering, which beds the baited bullet. Squeeze a trigger and your fisted hand can feel the joiner breathe. The pistol, the rifle is furniture, so we lean there. The rains have come, which means if you can feel it on your covered head and have any inclination to hold your hand open and then wipe your face or laugh at the way it drips off the end of your hood and into your mouth, that it's too warm to snow any further, thank God. This is the season of raised beds of lettuce and backyard barbecues and the distant chords of AR-15s. It is likely that men mostly no longer handcraft rifles, at least not the kind that pollinate cities. They're too much in need to pace themselves alive at the speed of furniture. There are men waiting at the gates of factories for them to come off the line to feel like men again, when their hand can no longer reap the long cassava, muscle the sweet potato, the reluctant white yam from the ground. I mean to change the texture of the poem like this, slow the flight of my baser instincts out from me, and perhaps also slow the flight of something lean towards the hearts of my children. So I go to the ground, the dirt under my fingers, which in order to dig I squeeze into a fist to feel the breath of the earthworms and field mice and black beetles, the carrots and crabgrass. I haven't done this in a while. This is how a man can return to church when called by the almanac's predictable moons. This is how a man might honor his fathers and fathers and fathers and make a place men standing outside the factory's gates waiting for something more insistent to call their names. 2. Spring, remarks the Uber driver, a black man, Amir, who hears in me the song of my fathers and so asks the question, where are you from? Soon we're speaking of governments and histories, both ones we're taught and the ones we inherit, the ones we're asked with some desperation in the tone of our masters, take masters here in every iteration, scholarship, the whip and holler, whatever, to believe unexamined. I'm a student of all these histories. They help me recognize the seasons when they come, discern what rains mean cleanse and which they are intent to the deep freeze. Soon we're speaking of colony. He's from Ghana, and black and black and black and black. And so I'm riffing on the People's National Movement, Michael Manley, Walter Rodney, and the IMF in disharmonious geopolitical bars. I'm Calypso in oil, beach, and gun shipment. I'm talking Colombian cocaine through Trinidad, South African diamonds, and why parts of Durban smell like women. I put on my best shirt to visit as a boy who maybe kissed me under a front porch while their mothers ground masala above our heads. Amir wants to know, in fact asks in that manner of rhetoric that already knows, what the responsibility of black people is in their own demise. How he says local corruption is in equal measure responsible for colony's long and mutating wealth. My words. How of all the people murdered in Chicago, few aren't involved in crime. His words. No doubt, I say, police hell involved in crime. Maybe we are even more beautiful than we imagine. This need we have in every hour to relieve our captors of their enormous burdens, to imagine the boot heels unfairly troubled by our necks. There came a time my grandmother could no longer afford to grow cocoa on his own land. I've danced the troughs myself, my feet black and sticky all the way to the calf, to have never drank the chocolate directly from that harvest. Amir is beautiful. So is the other African driver I had 2 days ago, who admired how white children in the suburbs stayed in their basements until their Uber arrived, while ours stood on the corners. Eyesores, he says. Crystal meth, I say, is primarily smoked in basements. Of course, it's spring, so we're on the corners more, and soon the calibrations will begin in earnest. Our organs will bloom in the streets. 3. Where are you from? Or where you're from? Or where you stay? Or where your grandma stay? If the initial response seeks to stay a clean retort, where you from? The question of the long draw, the inquiry of gun weight, the ellipsis of handle angled against waistband, the question answered in the hieroglyph of shoulder, shrug and arm flex quick, like the jab can southpaw from hip to opposite jaw faster than the steel wants to whistle free. A most American sign language to signify West Side, Holy City, Aruka, Lopino Road, the Harp, loyal to Blackstone or gangster disciple, unruly ISIS or Rasta, enterprise proper or dash trace. Where you from? South, where the dirt is black, the devil's woodyard, Joburg, Soweto, black jersey crew, we wear light blue, we paint our faces in the stories we inherit and turn and add our stories too. Hence histories, hence truth and my truth, not a discipline of mastery over a knowledge or a people desperately in need of control, which lends more than half its spelling to the word colonize, which is how black folk etymologize through conjure and tarot, you feel me? I'm from where we stay low because the bees be whistling, because the crop is in the ground. I'm from Tree Canal Cutlass whistling toward the cane joint or the Panman broad back, Lavantil, Never Dirty, Caledonia, St. Madeleine, where the threshing house is a ruin, where massa don't need sugar grind from no more, Trench Town, St. Anne's, Jungle, where the machete is free to make music of a man's blood now, where the blade is abuzz with dreams of flight and so sleeps fitful against a hip, and nightmares of Haiti and rivers and rivers and rivers and rivers. Have you ever seen a crate of brand new machetes unburlapped beneath the moon? Nor I. But I still keep the secrets of the thin edges relationship to garlic, whose harvest has equal ability to heal and hold a blow open to fester. Have I then salted my brother's wound? Where and when precisely did this knowledge visit me? Did Yoruba Egun whisper this as I slept? Or did the Bolmec, Kalinago, Garifuna, folk who blood me deep below the parts where their massive heads breach the ground. History me, this knowing of life and death. And why? To vengeance on behalf of and against whom? Have I been a wizard all this time? Medicine man? Shapeshifter? What does the moon know of this circle of blood that brings me back and forth between America's rich dirt and Trinidad's in so many generations of truth? What of my line is warrior and what priest? Trickster and what craftsman? Is the furniture of the blade my legacy? What have I bequeathed my daughters? How will they repay me? 4. And the spring days lengthen, and the heat comes on like a large band carnival Tuesday, wave and wave of shimmering 90 degrees, then 90, then 90, then bombs bursting in air for weeks before the national keening. Depending on how low to the ground you've had to live, how long you lived in the posture of swamp crossing and singing spirituals to the gators and serpents, depending on how well you've learned to slow your breathing to mimic the breath of whatever lives below the ground you trust, because you're sure you will return there more than ever. Quiet ants, moles, earthworms, nocturnal rats. Depending on all this, you can pick the sound of bullet from celebrate, the sound of starburst as cover, but it's spring. So fireworks mimic the blooming, the spawn, even in their names: pistil, brocade, chrysanthemum, fish, peony, palm, glitter, willow, crosette, pearl, and bees, and bees, and bees, and bees, and bees. Once I lived and loved in the cover of that knowing, and so I lived because of it. Many years from the children who would come from me, I held dormant in my hands, my groin, my belly, all the knowledges I need to heal and irrevocably damage. I learned long before how to stay low, still the crop in the ground, bees hovering, cutlass ready, blade garlicked, memorizing the difference between celebrate, blood, buzz, bloom, head to the ground, laughing with the sun, promising my children the only legacy they need: live. Live, live, dig down, plant a thing, watch it come up, beautiful, the days lengthening, summer coming up over all this blood, all this undeniable beauty. Thank you all. That's it. And this is the Q&A part, so I imagine that what I'm doing or questions. I suppose that's how that working. Yeah, live. Okay, cool. Yeah, I hear I'm drinking this rum, so throw questions up in the comment, and I'll see what I could do. We have it's only 1:28, I suppose. Yeah, we have some time, and if after all the questions it has time, maybe there's even one somewhere here to do. But yeah, hit me with the questions. Somebody just from Laura Vrana is the question. You're very welcome, Laura. Could you talk more about the pandemic poem writing process? I don't. In these times, I don't know how much I could talk about process, except that I think I've been prepared. It would appear more than most people for what we in to go to shit for a long time, right? And so part of my work, part of what I see my work as in this time, is to kind of keep my eyes open for what is possible in the new world that we have brewing, right? I'm one of those people hoping that stuff don't go back to normal. That there's some new world we're struggling with after this. I want to have the kind of I want to have the kind of faith in humanity that even if the world that comes next is equally fucked up, it could be a different fucked up because we're trying something else. I want us to believe we are the sense enough to try something else. And so that particular poem, I feel that that I received it by being open, by in some way actually being the most disciplined I've ever been, and so being ready for when the poem comes. The way Toy Derricott taught us in Carvey Cannon. She would, Tara Betts was here last week. Could tell you about that. She'd make you leave a workshop and go and write the poem that you got an idea for during the workshop. So yeah, I think that's the process for me right now. I'm trying to listen, and so therefore by keeping my eyes open, like trying to listen deeply to what's coming. Somebody else says use of repetition in your work. Tracy D. Hall, thank you, Tracy. Repetition is part of rhythm and meter, right? Repetition is a ramp. Repetition is also and ramp both up and down, right? And so what I do again, this is a question of listening, and I think the craft that leads us in that direction is that if you study as many poets as possible and you write as many things as possible and as many times as possible, then what you discover in listening is when something is asking you to repeat itself, when something is asking you for the swell, if you will. Man, it's so hard to answer questions without the people in front of you, right? To like not feel the lean and give. But I feel like that's it. I feel that when repetition comes in my work, it's not because it's this conscious idea, okay, I'm going to repeat now. In the writing, like I feel I need a ramp to someplace else. That where I'm going, what the poem wants is a ramp. And I don't yet know whether that repetition is ramp up or ramp down until I turn the corner, if you will. So I think that's the best way I can answer that right now. Yeah, indeed. It's rum in the cup. Ernesto, this is a very mid-shelf rum happening here. This is a Appleton, solid mid-shelf, good price point. Yeah. Tammy Song, how would you say your writing process has changed in the last 5 or 10 years? I think it's niche. It is process for me has been about how to get flexible with discipline. I've never had the kind of personality that can get up every morning at 6 or 7 or whatever the time be and write for that time. And now that I have children, not only do I not have the personality, but that ain't how we do. But part of the listening that I've been talking about in these times is also about listening for when I am open and ready to receive and ready to do the work. It is also about patience. The process is a lot about patience, because there was a time many years ago where, and I think most poets can probably get with this, right? Where you feel like maybe I'll never write another thing of use again, and I'm not writing these days, and I'm panicking because I have writer's block. So I no longer believe in writer's block. I'm clear that when I'm not physically writing, that I'm composing, right? That everything that's happening around me is translating itself into song and sound and rhythm, because that's what it's been doing for the last 25 years, right? And so it's been translating into sound and song and rhythm. And so because I know that, and because I feel to a certain extent, because therefore I'm not panicking after the simple mechanics of whether or not I'm writing down, then I'm open to hear more of the things happening in my life, to hear the clatax of the bois, to hear that new bass you be hearing in hip hop that go doom, right? And to ask that bass a question as opposed to the kind of bass that we had pre-electronics, right? But even that new electronic bass is something for that new bass, right, to find its way into hip hop. We had to imagine it some way, right? It's not artificial because it's electronic. We still had to imagine the sound for the sound. We still had to imagine the sound for the sound to show up, right? And so that imagination and that composition before you write is also a discipline that's been developing. La Torraison, a little background history. I think so. Yeah, I grew up. I was born in Brooklyn, grew up in Trinidad, returned to New York at 19 years old, and lived there for 25 years, and now I've been living in Chicago for the past almost 7. So I think that to say a little, I've written 4 solo books and a bunch of other things, and of course that's the real Cliff Notes version, right? I think that if I'm to maybe get a little closer to the heart of what somebody asking that question would want to know, it's about that masculinity, love, music, sport, and warriorhood made me. I think that's what I would give. Cheryl Boyce Taylor, do you have a new book coming? Yes, I have a book called American Orisha, which is the most recent thing that is which is about to be the next published thing, I hope. It'll be the largest book I've written to date. I'm excited about it. I think one hopes that with every book you write, you're doing better, right? I think it's the best thing I've written so far. I think the poems in them are the best poems I've written so far. I think I've in them begun the process of a sort of transformation and digging and healing and loving that that my writing has been after since I was 9, to be honest, since the very first time my mother told me, well, stop coughing people in their face and start writing about how you're feeling, right? So I think that in a kind of a way that maybe there is something of not a cycle closing, but a cycle recognition, a cycle realizing that's happening in this book. So yeah. I'm going to answer this, Lauren. Thank you. I'm going to answer this according to a version of Lucille Clifton's answer many years ago. Lucille Clifton, when asked how she had so many children and still wrote poems, she said, I wrote shorter poems. And so my answer is similar in that I have not asked my writing to fight against fatherhood. I have not asked fatherhood to fight against my writing. I have not asked fatherhood to carve out space for me to write. I have not asked writing to carve out space for me to father. I have done the writing that is allowed me, that is presented to me in that space. So often is writing about them, is writing about the continuing of the lineage between them and me and my mother and my father. It is a discovery. I include them in all the work that ends up flowering itself into poems. So I just make them come and practice bois with me. I just make them sing the love way. When I go in and fix my altars, the altars to my Egun and and to issue and whatever, I just make them come with me and I talk and make them say the words, right? And sometimes they're interested, sometimes not. But what it means is that the thought process, and even and in that way, even the process of prosody, right, is intertwined at all times in the work, right? I am in the process of listening to them, listening to how they respond, and just being grateful, right, for the opportunities, for what that gives me rather than what that deprives me of in the writing process. In addition, my partner Matilda, she is even better than I am in creating opportunity for me to do my work, right? So if I even look distracted, like I have something to write or like something on my mind to do, she hasn't working. Had this thing I want to write. Boom, stop washing them wares, stop doing this. Boom, what you need to do later. All right, let we change this around so you could do that thing. And so in that way, I'm also very fortunate to be able to be as flexible as I can be with the writing process. And the lots still today. That's a great question, partner. Yes, of course, Trent Lott is no longer the culprit per se, but we are very clear now in the time of Trump that well, he have a cabinet of Trent Lotts, right? And so one of the things I think is important, it's a younger me, a younger more, fuck you all, we come in, we go burn down everything, right? And I'm certainly not that anymore, but I do think that there is part of this struggle in which we need to let people know we need to keep people nervous, right? Like, yeah, you ain't just doing whatever you want just so, partner. We come in, right? So you better stop with the going forward in the fuckery you doing because you're back exposed. So you better turn and talk to me. And so in that way, I think the idea, the spirit of Trent Lott is still applicable. Yeah. Yeah, boy, Andy, I had a smile when you talk about rum, boy. Rum the smile when you talk about me. Poetry saving my life. At some point, you have to know, or at some point, especially when you have the privilege of all the hindsight, you're kind of aware of what is tethering you to the planet. What kept you tethered to the planet. So I wrote poetry as a child back home. When I came here at age 19, I didn't involve myself in anything artistic for about 7 years. I just ran the streets doing everything you can imagine a 19-year-old alone in New York City in the late 80s and early 90s was doing. So that when Sherry Ann Smith called me out my house in 1994, December, snowing outside, and I had to go outside with the pager and call her, and she said, "Like, go a poetry reading." I say, "You fucking mad? I'm not leaving." And she bawled behind me on the phone until I went inside and bathed and put on my clothes. And I went to that poetry reading, and I came home and I wrote a poem, and that was it. I have not stopped reading or writing poems since that moment, right? That begins my life as a writer, as a poet, right? And so I'm very clear that that's the point at which I found a repeat of that. It's the word I'm looking for. That relationship that happened when I was 9 years old, and we were living in Winnipeg, Canada, and I was fighting every day. And my mom said, "Why don't you write about it?" And I started writing, and I fought less, right? I recognized it, not immediately, but shortly after, I recognized what was happening. And so when I say poetry saving my life, I'm being as literal as you can be. This isn't some sort of esoteric idea for me. Can you talk about the musical influences in your work, how they affect sound, rhythm? So the musical influences, we have to start, of course, we begin with calypso. But like all black music, right? Calypso is a hybrid music, right? And it is a music that exists because Africa had to fight its way through through the attempt at cultural domination in order to exist. Right? And so what you have there as a result is both influences that come directly from Africa and influences that come from Africa and have to sneak through the corridor behind some Europe thing, and so come out leaning, right? Come out limping. And that is calypso, that is reggae, that is blues, that is jazz, that is everything, right? That is that is samba, that is salsa, that is everything, right? So I start with, and a lot of those musical influences in calypso come from the griot tradition of West Africa, right? And at the same time, right, the ballad form as we kind of understand it from Europe, and at the same time, other kinds of rhythmic influences deeper in the understanding that come from Congo, right? That come from Central Africa. And some of those things I did not know they came from Central Africa, that they came from Congo until fairly recently, right? Like I knew them in my body, right? I was, for instance, when you talk about the lave way, the music that accompanies the stick fight, that accompanies Kalinda, right? I've been straining after stick fight since I was about 12 years old, right? And older people telling me, "Boy, nobody don't really do that again, ting, ting, ting." And so, but somehow I was finding it in Trinidad rhythms. And when I started to write about those rhythms and about things that when I look back at things I wrote in the 90s, I don't even know how I knew it, right? That's how deep a musical history can be seeded in you, can infect you, right? And so I started with all that. Now, if we're talking about also just straight up performers and stuff, then we had to talk Prince, Stevie Wonder, Bob Marley as well. We had to talk about Shaka Khan. We had to talk about Tina Turner. We had to talk about all the shit music of the 80s, Air Supply, all of them, right? We had to talk about, and then we have to talk about hip hop, right? That is because hip hop again is a reintroduction of something circular in a way, right? When I remember 1979, when I first heard Rapper's Delight, we drive Lady Young Road, and I knew immediately that this was the music of the future. I remember jumping up from the back seat like, "What the fuck is this?" But I didn't say, "What the fuck is this?" They would have knocked me out, right? But my mom and my dad are like, they're looking at me like I'm crazy. Like this is some sort of fad, ridiculous thing about somebody talking really fast over music. This can't survive, right? But I felt deep inside me that this is this is everything I've ever wanted to hear, right? And so that in terms of hip hop, the hip hop becomes a really huge influence as well. In addition, you know, I sang in the choir and all kinds of stuff as well too. So there's a sort of built in my formal education understanding of the ways in which these forms and these musical tropes, if you will, how they work, how they insist, how they try to take over, how they were resisted by us, and still what is useful, to incorporate of them in the way I talk. And not just useful, what I can't avoid because they're part of the way in which my song and body works. Yeah. How has living in two countries framed how you view the world? It's more than how I will answer that is by saying it is framed. Certainly, the process of the writing, in that I'm an immigrant in another place, in which I am constantly attempting to remember, and in attempting to remember, I am panicking because I don't have so many. There aren't as many people, or at least at least say 15 years ago, or at least before the internet really blew up, right? There weren't as many ways for me to find the people who had the same historical memories I had, right? And so a lot of my writing has been to reach back and remember, to reach back and make sure I wasn't crazy, that thing I remember actually happened, right? Half the time me and you calling each other and we talking about this, that, and the other. Like, we could get together 20 times in 5 years, and 19 of them times we will repeat at least 2 or 3 of the same stories, right? Because we come from the same place and we're not there again. And I believe that part of the human animal needs to remember in order to verify its existence, right? It's an existentialist exercise. So the living in two countries, it's less that it's framed how I view the world, except that, like, I understand the world as a very, very, very vast thing. But it does frame the way I understand memory. Yeah. Thank you, Cheryl. Glennis, what role do your dreams play in your poetry? So, a lot. The first piece I wrote, Light, comes directly out of a dream. I'm trying to remember of other things. I think parts of the last one, Spring, come directly out of a dream too. And so I am writing so as to create, and I'm writing so as to translate, and I'm writing also so as to report, right? I think there are now I'm trying to think about whether or not whether or not I write dreams if I'm not understanding what's happening in them. And I'm not sure about the answer to the question, but I have particular poems where the entire dream just shows up, where I just dictate it faithfully, and that's the poem. And so I try to be disciplined about that too, about listening to the dreams. I want to answer. I'm going to try to answer one or maybe 2 more questions. I'm being asked to wrap up and tell about the wonderful Samia Bashir, who is going to be next Friday reader, 1 Central, 2 Eastern. Hey, Rebecca. Yeah, me too. How did you pick up a Trinidadian accent when you were born in Brooklyn, and how did that influence your writing? I went back to Trinidad as a baby. I went back to Trinidad as a 2-year-old. So I had an American accent, according to my mother and aunts and them, for like 5 minutes. I landed in Trinidad, and then I was a Trinidadian. And so that question about accents is about sounds, right? And I remember Oh God, shit, what's his name? Old dude now who write Iron John. Fuck. You see what Romulus do? Anyway, I remember going to a poetry reading that he gave, and he did a poem by Yeats in Yeats's accent, and then went on to explain to us that he read it to us in Yeats's accent so we can see why Yeats made the choices he made in the writing. Because all meaning is derived from sound. What a word means to us is based on how we hear it and what that hearing means within that context. So I suppose, so even the accent I have now is a melange or an evolution of a number of things. I think, you know, 5 years from now, we'll be talking about the way in which Chicago has influenced my sound and therefore my song, right? And therefore what meaning means to me. And therefore, even the literal things I say, right? Like you know, Joe as a way to refer to homie, right? Is something that would not have been in my lexicon before Chicago, for instance, to just give a real simple, you know, example. Patricia, how does your work in the prisons change the tenor of your own work? What is it? I think it absolutely does. How it does, I'm not always sure. I think it intensifies it. I feel as though it tightens the lines, and I don't necessarily always mean tighten in terms of makes them better craft-wise. I think it makes them, I literally means tense, right? I do a lot of first draft writing while I'm in the jail teaching them, you know, but I give them a prompt and I write in from the prompt too. And in that, within those walls, and so I feel like you can't escape the influence of the room in which you're writing too, especially if that's a room in which you are regularly writing. In the same way that I feel that the room in which you're writing is often what's the size of the page. If you're writing in a little notebook, your line's gonna be shorter, right? As opposed to a big book. Your sense of the room the body has to move in is broader, right? And so if you have to move in a tight room and express yourself, what does your language do? How do you talk? How do you mirror the speech of the people in your room, right? When you're sitting down with 16 other men who don't know when they're going to see the light of day, what does it do to your own writing? Because whether or not you're writing about that moment, you're speaking back to them. All of you all are over after 20 minutes going to get up and then share back work and start to talk about the work, right? So that's the way in which it changes the tenor. I'm often speaking, I'm often, you know, I'm talking to somebody else. I'm talking to people like right here. And that's very different. That makes my body occupy the space very differently if I'm talking about my mother there, as opposed to if I'm talking about my mother in my backyard that has grass and flowers and the sound of a train passing by. I want to say thank you to everybody. Thank you to Lauren. Thank you to Joanne. Thank you to Furious Flower. Again, Samia Bashir is the truth. She coming through next Friday, 1 o'clock Central, 2 Eastern. Please jump back on here, get with her. We have one more minute, and I thank all of you who came on here and listened to me and asked me questions. And I love you very much. I have 7 more seconds. Deuces. Thank you.